Hello again, folks. Um, I'm just in the middle of doing some work on the trumpeter, um, the big 148th U-boat, and I've got a need to do a little bit of simulated rust work on some of the components. So I just thought I'd do a quick video of a sort of fairly simple hack for producing crusty looking rust components, or certainly simulating them, which is very cheap to do. You don't need any specialist liquids and sort of materials, which I know are available, and that's fine if you want to use those. But this is a quick hack that I've been using for years, maybe the last 20-30 years, and it's easy to do. So I've set this camera up here just to do some close-ups so you can see what's going on. I'm in the process of looking to set up a like an overhead rig with the multiple cameras on, so that the cameras don't get in the way. But you'll see what I mean in a moment. So but basically the only materials you need to use for this is some plastic cement. Now for this I'm going to be using plastic weld. Now this used to be my go-to cement for years and years, and I still use it quite a lot for larger components and things that I want to guarantee that aren't going to come apart, that might be under a lot of strain. But I've switched more recently, the last sort of 5 years or so, to using the Tamiya extra thin for just small component work, because it's just more it's more convenient to use. What you will notice is I've got this base here, which it's like a 3D printed thing that I picked up somewhere, and that will fit the bottle in there and stop it tipping up. And if anyone's ever used this and had an accident where they've knocked the bottle over, they'll know why you want a base on it, because it makes quite a mess, and particularly if you've got components of a kit lying about. I've written off a few pieces over the years where I've had an accident with the glue, so it's now held firmly in a base. I'm going to be using just a soft brush. This is a cheap brush. I think it's one of those ones that came with a starter set, I think. And I'm also going to be using this, which is basically baking powder that cooks use for making cakes and pastries and things like that. And it's different from baking soda, so don't mix it up with baking soda. I've never tried baking soda, but I don't think it works, whereas this does. I know this works. So it's baking powder that you want to buy. This you can pick up anywhere, any supermarket. This has been topped up over the years, but I mean the date on the top of this says best before December. I think that says 2000, I think. It might say 98. It's hard to read. So I've had this a while, and if I open the container, you can see it's just a very fine white powder. A bit like, it's not like flour, it's almost like icing sugar. You can see it. It's just sort of crumbly. Presumably it's non-toxic because you use it in food, and but you'll see the effect we get in a minute when I use it. Now if I just switch to the other camera, what I'm going to do, I'm going to be just applying it to this piece of styrene girder. Not sure where this came from. I think it might be an EMA part. It might be Plastruct or Evergreen, but it's basically white styrene in a sort of I-beam profile. So effectively what we need to do is, I'm going to open the glue up and I'll bring the glue over to the right side so I can actually reach it. And I'm also going to put a sheet of paper under here, and it's only to catch the excess powder. So basically, you start to paint this on. Now what I normally do first is I normally paint the glue all over the piece that I want to do, and I give it a coat first off just to basically soften the surface. Now this plastic weld, it's quite aggressive. I mean, it's designed for, as well as styrene, it'll glue things like perspex and ABS and other types of plastic. I'm literally just covering that like that, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to sprinkle a load of the powder over the top and tap it off, and you can see that it starts to stick to the surface. Okay, so again I'm going to apply a bit more glue and then get a bit more out of the at this stage you can start to sort of press it on with your finger like this, with a tap. You can see that it's starting to give you quite a thick crust. Now when you apply another coat, some of that will come off on the brush. Now it doesn't do any harm to the plastic weld, so if it ends up in the sink into the bottom of the plastic weld bottle, it doesn't really have an effect on it. Now this time I'm going to press it into the excess that's on there. I'll put a bit more on the top of here. And what I'm aiming for here is you can go as heavy or as light as you like. And you will find that although some of it sticks to it, if you give it a rub with your finger once it's dry, some of the thicker pieces will break off, which is fine because you don't want it that, you know, it's sort of covering all the detail up or whatever it is that you're applying it to. So a little bit more on there, just sprinkled on the surface. I'll get a bit more out of the and then tap it on again. As I say, you can brush it off the surface there, but it started to stick to the, I'll put a bit on the end as well. I'll knock off some of the clumps with the brush. Now it may be difficult to see on the camera, I'm not sure. You'll see it once I put a coat of paint on it. Sort of hold it there. You can see that it's sort of crusted on the surface there, and on the top and around there. And it's got that kind of crumbly texture. So that's what you're aiming for to start with. So, I mean, I think that's adequate for what I've put on there. You can put a sort of thin coat on, leave it to dry, add another layer. I've done it up to 3 or 4 layers in the past, particularly if the parts are quite fine, and you don't want to lose any detail or melt any detail away with the glue. You can just put a very thin coat on, sprinkling of this, leave it to dry, and then go over it again maybe 2 or 3 times. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that just to harden off for a bit, and then I'll be back with a coat of paint on it, and you'll probably see the surface much better with the paint on. So about an hour later, I've given this a coat of paint. I've actually used a Humbrol colour, turn that around that way, matte 73. I think the colour's called Wine. It's like the old brick red colour that they used to do. Although I think they still do brick red actually. Now I'm using enamels. I mean, you can do this with acrylics, but I found that I mean, I've got plenty of enamels, and it works really well with those, particularly for the next process, which is going to be dry brushing. Now, I won't assume that everybody knows what I mean by dry brushing, so I'll give it a quick demo of it anyway. But I'll talk about the sequence of colours first. So if we go to the other camera, so the actual colours I've got here are, as I mentioned, 73, which is that sort of brick, sort of very dark red colour. I think the official name is Wine. I've then got a Revell colour. The previous one was Humbrol. This is a Revell colour, which is 37, which is reddish brown, according to the paint guide. And then moving on again, another Humbrol colour. This is matte 62, which is leather. And then the final one is Orange Linings, which is matte 82, another Humbrol colour. And you can see, hopefully the camera will get the colours sort of fairly close. In fact, they're not, because the orange is actually quite orange. But on the camera, you can see the difference between the colours. So there's your base coat there. And then this one's slightly browner. And then we go a lot lighter for the leather colour. And then with the orange. And for any dry brushing techniques, you've got to go from dark to light. And generally in sort of, smallish steps rather than completely different. You wouldn't go from this colour straight to the orange, because it'd just look horrible. So for dry brushing, I've got this soft brush. Used it an awful lot. They eventually get worn out because the hairs break off as you dry brushing. And I think it's a Dala Rowney one, this half, it says on it, I'm presuming that's ½ inch. Yeah, it works pretty well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the second colour, because the first colour, the base coat, is on there. You can see, I'll bring that up, maybe put the card behind it there, and you can probably see the texture on it if it'd focus. And behind it there, maybe not quite, but it's got a very rough cast look to it now. So this first colour, I'm gonna put it on the brush, and it needs to be relatively thick, so you've got to give it, I mean, I've already pre-mixed these, but you need to give it a really good stir. And I've got a bit of tissue here, which I'm going to wipe the excess off. And then on this card, and I'll switch to the other camera again now so you can see what's going on. So on this card, I'm basically going to brush most of the paint out onto the card. But for this first colour, I want it to be relatively heavy because it's very close to the other colour. So I'm not going to brush it out too much. And then I'm basically going to work this in. And what it's doing, and it may not show up massively well on the camera at this stage because the colours are very close, it's actually picking up most of the surface. It's not just the highlights, it's picking up most of the surface. But that's what I want, because I want that sort of two colours to complement each other. So the original colour, that very dark red, is now sitting in the background, and the main surface of the sort of crusty area that we've applied is in this. It's not really a lighter colour, it's just a slightly different colour. This one's a little bit more brown than red. So the two colours complement themselves. And I'm going quite heavy with this because it needs to be a good coat, but it's not so heavy that it's just changing the entire thing to this colour. You can still see the other part. Let me just see if I can brighten that up a little bit. Sometimes if I move the light away and then come back in, there you go. It'll pick up the difference. So you can see that there's just a slight sheen now where I've been dry brushing that, but it's picked that up. So I've worked that over it like that. Now this is the thing about dry brushing now. When they're all very similar colours, what I then do is I move on to the next colour. Now this time it's the leather, and I don't wash the brush out. And never try and, the reason it's called dry brushing, you want a dry brush. You don't want this to have any trace of thinners in it and switch to the next colour, because it'll just take the previous colour off again. Now this particular tin that I've picked up, I've got a few tins of this. It's actually quite an old tin, and it's let's just go back to the other camera for a bit more light. You can see it's quite thick inside. Now that's ideal for dry brushing. So a lot of the older paints that I've got, I save for that. As I say, you can do this with acrylics. It just happens that I happen to have these colours in the enamels. So again, I'm going to put some of that on it. You can see this is quite thick and sort of, it's almost like an oil paint. So I'll wipe that off. I'll take the bulk of the paint off with a tissue, and then let's go back to our other view, and this time let's turn that round, and you can see immediately the difference in colour. But it doesn't matter if there's a bit of the other colour on the brush, because they all just sort of blend together. And this time I'm going to really get most of the paint off this brush. And you can see that the brush is quite sort of thick and what would the word be, claggy, I suppose. But that's what you want. If I turn that over so it's white again, there's very little coming off now, but that's what you want. So now we go over it again, and this time what it's doing is it's picking up those highlights and catching on the edges of the colour. And it's quite subtle. It's not like a really strong difference. You can be quite rough with it. Now, because I've done this in a bit of a rush, some of the original colour is wearing off at the point where the edge of the girder is, so it's sort of pulling away a little bit, but we can touch that in, because the dry brushing isn't the only technique I'm going to use here. But I'm just trying to get that contrast. I'm going to do that again and just go a tiny bit heavier. So let's get most of that off. And again, there's very little coming off this now. I've got to press really hard to get it to come off. I'm literally just putting And this first process is literally just building up some layers of colour. So, there we go. Now, I'm going to try and get this to light again. See if I can raise the light balance a little bit. That might be a bit better. There you go, and you can see the colour there. You can get it to a little bit better. You're starting to pick that up now. So now the final colour at this stage is just the little flash of orange. Again, go with the orange straight onto the leather. And that'll blend in, because again that's lighter again now. And this time I'm not going to press very hard. I'm literally just going to dance that over the top a little bit. Just to that point. I'm just trying to get those different colours and sort of dab it on a bit. Okay, so there's the finish on that now. And then we'll come back to the next stage. So once that's dried, and you'll notice I've turned the brightness up of the camera a bit, so it'll show that up. You know, you can see that sort of crustiness to it now. And what I'm going to use now is I've got some Scotch Brite. This is a worn piece that I've been using to rub down parts and, you know, rubber tires and all kinds of stuff. Doesn't really matter what kind of state it's in. It's just like a kitchen scourer. So cut a little square of that out, and you end up with a little piece like this, and you can dip it into your lighter colours. And I've got a bit of paint on the end of this now. Here, there you go. And I'm going to dab that on there just to get rid of the excess. And then you can take it and you can dab it onto this, and it'll leave sort of patches of the pure colour on there, and it'll give that kind of effect of that you get with rust, where you get that sort of much lighter tone on the top. I am doing this quite rapidly for the video. I mean, I generally leave time between coats, really, just to get it to work slightly better. But this gives you the general technique, and you can play about with this. You've got that kind of effect there. Now, it's a little bit too orangey at the moment, but that's okay. And you can, in fact, use your orange colour to just add a tiny bit more. And again, you need to dip it in the paint. So there's the orange colour on the paint, and obviously that's too wet, but if you keep dabbing this on the card, eventually you'll end up with just some traces on the on the Scotch-Brite, and then this, you just be a little bit more selective and just put the odd patch in there. Now, it does look quite light at the moment, but it will dry a little bit darker. You can see now that there's patches on there. You can sort of make them look a little bit more random, and once they dry, they'll go that lighter color again. And then what I tend to do with these, once I'm happy with the overall effect, once it's completely dry, and I'm talking maybe 24 hours later, I'll run a dark thin wash into it and catch the sort of corners of things. I mean, if this had rivets on it, you'd want to just pick out the rivets with a little bit darker. And then you can do a final dry brush with the lighter colours again, just to highlight everything again. So you get the general idea. I mean, I've done this many times on various bits and pieces, and then once it's built in, it's very good for sort of exhausts and things like that on tanks and, you know, old trucks and things. So that kind of worn, crusty rust that you're after, maybe, you know, sort of shipwrecks or something like that. But yeah, it's not a bad effect. And another option, and let's just switch cameras again. You know, you can invest in some pigments as well. So this is, move the light up so we can see that. This is MIG ammo, medium rust. You can see it's that kind of rusty colour there. We've also got light rust, which is more orangey. Now, if I show you those, now you don't need to use these because obviously it's one more thing that you're having to buy, but these last forever. You can see in there, I mean, I've been using this for probably 2 years, and I've hardly used any at all, and I've used it quite a lot. And if we get a brush, and I'll use that brush again that I used for the for applying the baking soda, you just put a little bit of that in there, and let's go back to the other camera. Move that out of the way. So this here, you can dust that in. Now this one is actually very close to the colour that we've applied anyway, so you may not see much of a difference there with that, but it does give that sort of dusty effect to it. But maybe with the lighter one, it'll pick up a bit more. Yeah, you see that's going to sit in the corners of the girder, and then we can you can put it on quite heavy in places. I mean, you look at that, that's a very sort of dry looking rust there, but the combination of the paint, the pigment, and the fact that you've put this texture on can make all the difference. And again, there's, you know, you can go as much or as little as you want. If you think you've put too much on, if you get yourself a one here, like just like an old paintbrush, like a stiff regular paintbrush, just move that back a touch and up a touch, or maybe down a touch. There you go. Do a bit more space, and you can put that in, and you can take some of that off again. You see, And okay, so it needs more taking off that side. I think that side's not too bad there. And you can rub these back. You can use a piece of tissue. You can get in the center of that with a bit of tissue and rub it back if you think you've gone too heavy. There you go, and that's taken us back through to the original color again. So yeah, you know, whatever you want to do with it, but it just gives you that really corroded, sort of crusty look. Once this is dry, a coat of matte varnish, you know, Tamiya, or you know, you could spray it over it as well, and that'll hold in any pigments for a start, although it will darken the pigments. But you know, the overall effect is something looking a bit worn out and very corroded. So there you go. With a bit of work, maybe a little bit more time spent on it than I've done in this video, a little bit of practice, you can probably get to looking more something like this, which you know, looks pretty realistic. That was done in a slightly darker tone. It's all through experimentation, but the same techniques we used on that as we used on the sample I did earlier on. So want a larger look at that. Go to camera 2. There we are. Just knock the light back a bit. It's Igor. Pull it back a bit. That's better, isn't it? Igor from Iron Man 3. And it just sort of sets the base off a little bit. And just adds to the effect. Okay, so thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to see more. I'm probably going to try and do some more videos like this in the near future for, you know, different techniques and things like that. If you've got any requests, then just let me know in the comments. Okay, thanks for watching.